Now, Alicia and Hillary talked about the importance of community, of friends. Bottom line, when our brains were invented, there was enough danger in the world that if we were not part of a tribe, we were not going to survive. And your brain knows that. Fast forward thousands and thousands of years later, we're working with old hardware in a new modern world. You don't have to leave your house to be able to survive. You'll be just fine. And yet your brain still thinks, if I don't have a tribe, I am not going to survive, which makes friendships a really important thing. And our next session is about evolving friendships, the art of maintaining and sustaining friendships, which is hard when you get old. Sorry. I was talking about myself, of course. When we get older, we've got so many responsibilities. We've got things to do. Our friends move, we move, things change, we evolve, we're not friends anymore. The beauty I think, of social media is it's easy to stay in touch with people and invite them to cool, fun parties years later. And Danielle Bayard Jackson knows about life transitions. Now, she started out as a high school teacher, and she went from high school teacher to friendship coach and educator, sharing the latest research on women's communication, women's cooperation, and women's conflict. She's a go-to media expert and has been featured in outlets like the New York Times, Oprah Magazine, and CBS News. And you can jump on her social media to learn about the research that's being done on connection and see her all over the country speaking about the power of female friendships. Her podcast is called Friend Forward, and it's a powerful resource for women looking to improve their platonic relationships. We don't have much of that conversation. And her book is called Fighting for Our Friendships, and it's coming out next month. So please help me in welcoming Danielle Bayard Jackson.
All right, good afternoon. A lot of pressure being the last session of the day. I was like, who's next? Nobody? Okay. All right. I'm so glad to be here. I'll say this. First of all, the fact that you're alert and attentive, I appreciate that. Whenever I'm at a party or some kind of social gathering and that inevitable question of like, so what do you do comes up, and I say, well, I'm a friendship coach, it's kind of like, oh, that's adorable. And it's hard because I'm not used to getting that response. I actually started out as a high school teacher for about 6 years teaching high school seniors English, okay? Then I worked my way up, become academic chair, and was leading one of the top departments, one of the top high schools in the United States. And whenever I said that at a party, that got kind of different reactions, right? And then after 6 years of being in the classroom and academic chair, I left and got into public relations. So suddenly I find myself working with these very impressive, charismatic, high-achieving women. And that, too, got some cool thumbs up, right? Oh, I'm a publicist at a party. People are like, ooh, that's cool. So I'm still adjusting to be like, I'm a friendship coach. Ooh, God, it's a real job. And so what we're going to do today is I hope to kind of walk you through, hopefully, some surprising research around the power of women's friendship. I'm very tactical. I move very quickly. So what we're going to do is I am up here for an hour, but about 40 minutes, I'll be talking to you. I am going to pause 3 times throughout to let you talk through it or digest it with the neighbor, because as a former educator, it's important to me that you retain this information. I know that's likely to happen if you have a second to talk through it with somebody during the process, so we'll do that along the way so it's interactive, and we will reserve the last 15 minutes for questions. Does that sound good? Just to spice it up, okay. All right, so here we go. Kind of walked you through here. Started off as a teacher, and what's interesting about being a high school teacher is the number one thing that the girls wanted to talk to me about, I'm sure this is not surprising to you, was their friendships. This was between classes, after school, the number one thing. And I always joke that I have the pencil eraser marks on my seating chart to prove it, okay? They're making requests. I don't want to sit by her, and she said this, and she constantly. Every week. I made the foolish mistake of dismissing that as teenage stuff, because when I became a publicist, and now I'm working with women who are on the news and prepping them for media stuff, it wasn't long before I realized that they too, privately, had friendship issues. Something you're probably not going to lead with, right, when you're a woman who prides herself on maintaining some sense of self-sufficiency. I'm not going to let people know that I'm deeply unsatisfied with my friendships behind the scene. Am I getting close to anybody? Am I getting close? Okay. All right. So it's interesting because as I kind of stepped back and looked at the similarities between two seemingly different groups, young 17-year-old girls, mature, seasoned, accomplished 40-plus women, I saw that at the heart of much of our distress is the same thing. We're asking the same question. How do I position myself to enjoy more satisfaction in my friendships with other women? It's not necessarily something we outgrow. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. I want to start here because this new fact, this new research, is something that I like to anchor my entire work in. And it's this. Harvard has conducted the longest running study on happiness. There's just a book out sharing their findings. It was in the news a couple months ago. Like, everybody's chattering about it. They have watched people for over 80 years. They're assessing multiple factors, your income status, whether or not you have children, your marital status, and things keep coming out to the same conclusion, and that is this. The number one thing that determines your overall life satisfaction and well-being is the quality of your relationships. Do other things matter and influence those things? Absolutely. But it keeps coming down to this. The number one thing that determines your health and your happiness is how satisfied you are with your relationships. So how do we do that? Before we get into it, I want to kind of contextualize it for this audience specifically. We're talking about women who are maybe seasoned or maybe who have accomplished certain things, or they're at a certain point in their lives, in the life cycle. And here's something I find interesting, and I hope it kind of works to contextualize maybe some of the experiences you find yourself having currently. There's something known as high-stakes friendships. That doesn't mean important friendships, but they call them high stakes. These are time periods during our life where our friendships kind of outrank the influence and time invested with other groups of people. So, for example, they say that the first high-stakes friendships emerge around the ages of 10 to 12. For those of you who have young children, you might notice this is where it's even harder to have your voice as their main source of influence, because now they care less about what you have to say, and it matters what their friends say. This is what researchers refer to as chums. We're like best friends. But we're placing friends above family. That tends to dip when we get into our late 20s, 30s. This is because we have other competing obligations. Now I have my children. Now maybe I'm married. Now maybe I'm really invested at work, and it's important to me to climb and advance in my career. This is my focus. It does not mean friendship's any less important. I can't stress that enough. But in terms of how we tend to prioritize it. Does that friendship still offer some really important sense of support, emotional support, and things like that? Yes. But it has other competing interests. Now, as you advance in your career, the kids grow up, spouses pass away. I mean, statistically, men are, going to pass before, okay? Then that got dark really fast. Then those high-stakes friendships begin to emerge again. And now we've got more time. Now our kids need us less in a physical capacity. I'm in it right now. I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So the lifting them up in the car seat and all the things, okay? So many hours of my day, okay? But these friendships emerge again. They become high-stakes friendships, high priority, especially in comparison to other obligations which maybe kind of decrease. So for some of us, we might find ourselves in these stages where we're beginning to think, maybe for the first time, but maybe for the first time in a long time, about how intentional we'd like to be with these relationships, because it's so obviously in our face about, gosh, how satisfied am I? Because now it has a more prominent role in my life. So this is what we'll talk about. I thought that we'd kind of cover a lot of things kind of surface level as opposed to just one thing, because I don't know where we are. So we're going to talk very briefly about how to position yourself to make new friends, how to deepen friendships, creating resilient friendships, because it's one thing to have a bunch of friendships, but if at every little tussle or every little pinch you're ready to cut her off and go to somebody else, that's an issue. So how do we develop resilience in our friendships, especially when the research is telling us that while our friendships are deeper than men's, they are more fragile. So to me, that means I need to be a little more intentional about figuring out, okay, how do we get past the hump? So let's start here. The reason this is so important, you've heard it, so I'm not going to badger this too much. You're seeing all the same stuff I am about loneliness as an epidemic. Anybody read anything on that recently? Many of us, okay? It's probably top of the headlines because the Surgeon General has elevated that to his number one priority. The Surgeon General, we normally think about other obvious physical health factors, but loneliness as a health factor? He argues that it's central to many of the other health ailments that we face. is people not having any social support. So let's look at the 3 types of loneliness, because a lot of us might say, I'm not, or I am, but I can't pinpoint why. Well, let's look at why. The first is a form of loneliness known as intimate loneliness. This means you feel like you are not intimately known. Many people have this satisfied maybe by a romantic partner or a best friend. The second form of loneliness is relational, meaning you lack multiple friendships where I know you, you know me, and that's something special. And finally, what I think a lot of us maybe are suffering from but can't place our finger on it is something known as collective loneliness, where we feel like we don't belong to something greater than ourselves. For some people who are part of religious communities, they have this satisfied by that. People who are deeply involved in sororities or women's organizations, they might have that fulfilled. But for others of us who spend lots of time alone and we are deeply distracted by just our nuclear family and our one-off issues, but not a part of anything grander than ourselves, we might be feeling that, deeply disconnected. But how do we tend to these 3 things? How do we feel more satisfied in our relationships? That's what we'll take a look at. So before we talk about how to build depth, some of us are like, I can't talk about building depth. I don't even really have anyone. So let's look at 3 very quick strategies, which, by the way, I could talk about this all day, but we're just going to pull 3, okay? And again, remember, we're going to reserve the last 15 minutes for questions. So if something's brewing, please jot it down or put it in your phone so we can make sure that we tend to it toward the end of the presentation, okay? So let's start here with 3 tactical things. The first thing is I want you to reach out to what people refer to as super connectors. These are those people who love to say, oh, Jenny, you should meet my friend Ashley. You guys would hit it off. Anybody know somebody like that? Like they're deeply involved in all the things somehow. And you're like, girl, how do you have the time or the energy, okay? But for whoever that woman is, even if she's not your friend, if she's a coworker, if she's somebody on your street, so you do not have to be friends with this person, but somebody in your existing network who you know to be actively involved in multiple communities. There is no harm or shame in connecting with her, text, in person, and saying something to the effect of, hey, I'm looking to get more plugged in, and I thought of you because you're always out and about doing something exciting. And I was wondering, do you know of any events or places around here that are worth checking out? That's it. Because currently you're probably limited to your own personal social network. And to leverage somebody else's intel is very strategic. I also scripted it that way because people are more likely to help you, according to the research, if you tell them specifically why you identified them for the job. So me telling you, hey, I know you're always out and about. You always know what's going on, girl. What are your thoughts? What are your recommendations? She's more likely to help you. So she's either going to tell you, oh, there's this book club every Tuesday, you should go. Oh, there's this event on the 1st of the month, you should go. Or even better, you get an invitation as a +1. Oh, I didn't know that you were looking. Yeah, you should come with me. I'm involved at this thing every Sunday. But if right now you find yourself cringing, like, oh, I can never do that, you will never get your needs met if you're too afraid to make them known. So it starts right there. There's no shame in that. And most people are flattered that you thought of them to help you out. Can anybody think right now of a person who you could ask to help you in this way? Anybody have a super connector? Okay, sit on that a little bit. Think about that. Okay, number 2, become a regular. A lot of people say to me, but Danielle, it was so much easier when we were in school. It was so much easier. First of all, you're getting your memory's hazed because I remember vividly it was rough in high school. I don't know what everybody's talking about. Like, was I the only one? Okay. But a reason why we feel like we were making so many friendships so easily is because we were clocking hours together. You had no choice, okay? You're sitting next to little Johnny for 8 hours a day. At some point, you start connecting over the chewed up bubble gum he keeps putting under the desk. And you're like, you know what, that's interesting. Tell me more. Because I'm here with you for 8 hours a day, okay? The research tells us that it takes 34 hours to take somebody from an acquaintance to a friend. 34. No one's saying that has to happen in a couple weeks. That could happen over the span of 5 months. We're getting to know each other and develop some depth. But you have to clock hours. It sounds so simple, but some of us feel disconnected because we do not spend time with the people we claim are our friends. We spend 0 time together. Okay. So how can you become a regular? If we know that time is something that helps foster a certain sense of familiarity, and there's something known as the mere exposure effect, which means we tend to prefer people who are familiar. I don't even know you, but I prefer you because I've seen your face before. Well, how do I leverage that? How do I work that to my advantage? School seems so easy because it was scheduled for you, but now we have to manufacture those opportunities for ourselves. So is there something I can do with more regularity? I know it's not very sexy, but it's effective. So if I have a young child and I'm walking him or her around the park every day at 12, or if there's a certain coffee shop that I like and I say, you know what, I work remotely, I'm gonna work from this coffee shop every Friday morning from 9 to 10. How can I develop some kind of schedule in my life to position me to see the same faces with regularity? Because that makes it a little easier to say hello. And finally, go with who you know. A lot of times when people say to me, it's hard to make friends, I think we're using the phrase make friends and meet new people synonymously. However, the two are not the same. Make new friends means I'm starting from scratch. Meeting new people is starting from scratch, but making new friends simply refers to the art of cultivating something meaningful with another person. And I'm willing to argue a lot of us have options, but we either maybe dismiss them for some reason, like, oh, well, she's my boyfriend's cousin, so maybe she can't be we dismiss them for some reason. We told ourselves, well, too much time has passed. That would be awkward. Well, I didn't strike while the iron was hard. I'm sure she's not into it. Who are people who are already in your realm of awareness who, when you think about it, you're like, well, I like her company well enough that you could start there. You already have shared history. So if you are serious about positioning yourself to invite new connections into your life, I encourage you to try one of these three. We're going to pause here for a second. I'm going to ask everyone to talk to someone next to you and answer the question, what is one thing you can do by the end of this week to position yourself to invite new friendships into your life? I'm going to give us about 60 seconds. Do we have a DJ on hand? Come on, DJ, 60 seconds. All right. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm hearing some really great things, and I cannot wait to hear what you have come up with. I'm going to put us on the spot. Do I have somebody who can share with me something you came up with or something that a partner just shared with you? Let's hear from two women before we move forward. Some ideas that are brewing? Yes, ma'am.
I'm doing a paint night at my house on Saturday.
Okay. Perfect. First of all, love the energy. Love the energy. Yes. Perfect. Let's get another one. Let's get another one. Something we can do. Yes.
So Judy and I were talking earlier. We're both in Annapolis. We were just chit-chatting, and then when you asked that question, I just turned around and we just made a date for coffee.
Round of applause, please. Come on. Come on. I love to see it. Don't overthink it. And let me acknowledge, first of all, thank you to you two volunteers. That's perfect. Let me acknowledge, okay, sometimes people will ask me, what's the biggest difference between working with like teenagers and adults? I'm like, nothing. Because that fear of rejection is real. Where I have an idea, but like, what? She's probably busy. I don't want to look like I'm being clingy. I don't want to. Okay, so I'm not acknowledging that. This is a very real thing. But also, I'm going to challenge you to think about how many missed opportunities you've had because you already pre-scripted what she was going to say. You don't know her life. And then simultaneously, we have people who are like, my friends never reach out. They never. So it kind of all works together. So if you have these thoughts and you say to yourself, like, I wonder if she act on it. Don't let yourself think too long. If somebody comes into your mind, she'd probably like to ask her. Send her the picture. Give her the invite. Don't overthink it. Okay, so that would be my biggest advice there. Okay, wonderful suggestions. Thank you so much. So we're all making new friends this week, and you're going to be like, oh, Danielle, I am loaded up. Now what do I do with all of these friends? Okay, the next task becomes deepening them. Here's why this is so important, is because let's go back to what we said before. I just want to keep, so you can trust me that it all flows together. If we said that the number one thing that determines how long we live and how happy we are is the quality of our relationships, it becomes one thing to find friendships and to cultivate a network. That's one thing. But I'm focused on the quality part, because it doesn't matter if you've got a bunch of friends. I'm talking to my extroverts right now. We're overextended. We've got a lot of people in our social, but how deeply do they know you? How much do you feel known? How comfortable do you feel to express a need? I'm concerned about the quality of those relationships. So how do we take some of those that are maybe surface level and deepen them? Let's look at some ways that we can do that. The first thing you're going to have to do, anybody consider themselves to be an extrovert? Okay, yeah, I know. Don't think about it. Yes, you put your hand up. Yes. Okay, I saw a lot of hands, which I love. I love the energy. Introverts, they need us. Introverts find an extrovert and just like hold on tight, and they'll just work it out for you, okay? But here's the thing for some of us is a lot of us do feel overextended because we feel like we've got to do coffee with all the people, and we've got all these things going on. Well, I want to start here because I'm all about strategy and tactical, right? This all sounds great conceptually, but what do I do with it? Okay, so here we go. If you have all these friends, that's terrific, but if you want to deepen them, the first thing I'm going to encourage you to do is pick the 3 to 5 people you care to deepen with. That's not leaving anybody out, but time is a limited resource. So you can either go wide with light 45-minute coffee dates with 15 people, or you can identify the 3 women who you feel most curious about. And let's be honest, for those of us who are starting at 0, and we're thinking right now, like, gosh, I don't really have anyone, that's okay. Start with 3 women who you know, who you are curious about. We can start there. Those are the people I'm going to be intentional about clocking some hours with, getting to know. I'm intentionally pursuing you because I'm curious about you. So Dunbar's number is this concept developed by Robin Dunbar, and he argues that our brains only had the cognitive capacity to maintain 150 connections. Now, some people have pushed back on that, but they've done multiple studies in different ways, and they keep coming back to the same number, about 150. But if you think about that like a circle, and then smaller and smaller circles within it, then the smallest circle represents the number 5, which is the number of super, ultra close relationships that we can cognitively maintain. And get this, the research finds that if you have a romantic partner, he or she takes up 2 spaces. And this is where women with 3 kids are like, oh my God. What do you mean? Which is totally valid. And I don't know what the research says about that, so, you know. But I think what the general idea here is that to some degree we got to get strategic. Who are my people going to be? Who am I curious about? Who am I say I prioritize them, but is my action matching that? Am I saying, you know, I'm going to text her. I'm going to make the commute to go and see her. I'm going to follow up on that thing she told me about at the doctor. Who are those people? I don't want you to feel pressure to do it with all the people. Maybe the other people I catch you at a group outing every quarter. But my people, I am going to be active about figuring out how I can maintain closeness with them. Who are those people? Now, I do want to make this note before we move forward. I want to be very clear that I'm not pushing for you to just have your 3 to 5 and nobody else. Because the people outside of this ring here, that ultra 5, the people outside of that, sociologists refer to these rings as loose ties or weak ties, meaning people who you're not really close with, but they still add some kind of value to your life. So Bob from accounting or Janet from down the street, who you don't see often, but every time you do, it's a little chuckle, or she's putting you on to a new resource, and you're like, oh gosh, I didn't know that was a program that could be helpful, thank you so much. These people still add value to our lives. In fact, it's a random fact, they find that if you're looking for a job, they've done research to find that you're more likely to find a job from a weak tie than a close friend. It's likely because they have one foot inside your world and one in another. And for our close friends, we're probably kind of in the same spaces, knowing the same people. So I still need those weak ties because it adds texture to my social network. Okay? All right. So here's how you can take some of those friendships. You have identified your 3 to 5. Can anybody think of their 3? So we can build this out together. You're thinking of 3 women who are like, okay, I can be strategic with them. Okay, great. So this is not my concept. This is developed by an OG friendship expert, Shasta Nelson, and she calls it the frientimacy triangle. She argues that your relationship needs 3 things in order to be deep. The first is positivity, which seems obvious, but do any of us know that friend who's the negative friend? Do you find yourself desiring to spend more and more time with her? I mean, I'm not hating on her. If we're being honest, at some season in my life, somebody maybe has described me as the negative friend at some season in my life, right? But at some point, our lack of positivity is probably going to indirectly impact how much I want to engage with you. In fact, research from the Gottmans finds that successful relationships have a positivity to negativity ratio of 5-to-1, meaning because of how heavily negative interactions weigh on us, we need 5 positives to override that. So I'm not saying don't vent to your friends, don't spill a little tea, a little gossip with your friends. Okay, I'm not saying that, right? But I am saying when you look at your last 10 interactions, how many of them were the chronic complaining, the venting? So one of the advantages of friendship is I have someone to take my troubles to, yes. But if every time we get together is me talking about how everything sucks, at some point it's impacting my friendship overall. Can I get an amen? Thank you. Okay? The next thing is consistency. Do we see each other? Now, that rhythm might look different for every friendship. Maybe in one friendship, it's normal for us to text every day. Maybe in other friendships, maybe like every other week, we're grabbing coffee. But do we have a rhythm? I know low-maintenance friendships is a popular thing right now. It's a popular conversation. I have some strong feelings about it. I will say, okay, that if you're saying, oh, you know, I don't have to talk to my friends, but every 6 months, and we pick up right where we left off. I think that's wonderful. I think that speaks to your chemistry. I get that. I will tell you this. If I'm only talking to you once a quarter or twice a year, I really only know what you are choosing to self-report to me on that 1-hour conversation. I have had clients that I have talked to who are sharing with me health things, and at some point when I say, oh my gosh, now how are your friends kind of helping you out with that? Oh, they don't know. I don't want to bother them with that because we don't talk. You're just my girl. So I'm not here to qualify anyone's friendship. If it's working for you, it's working for you. I will say if you're feeling unsatisfied, I'm encouraging you to look at the consistency in your relationship. That's all I'm saying. And with this here, vulnerability. I want to say some things you might not agree with, but I'm saying them anyway, because I'm getting on a plane tomorrow, so I don't have to stay here and be bullied by you, okay? So I can say what I want, and then we're just going to head out, okay? Vulnerability. I know a lot of us are talking about it. I know it's like Brene Brown has a monopoly on the word. I get it, okay? I'll also say this. The best way I've heard it defined is you're taking a risk of rejection. That's why something feels vulnerable. You're saying to yourself, there's a chance this won't go well. There's a chance you're going to look at me differently, but you know what? I'm going to go for it. That is vulnerability. The reason I say that is because a lot of us think of vulnerability, and the image we conjure up is of a woman in a corner crying about her feelings and sharing with a friend. For some of us, that might qualify. We feel like, oh, that felt risky crying in front of her. That's true. But for some of us, talking about vulnerable topics like sex and hygiene and divorce and emotional pain and addictions and trauma, for some of us, I'm just going to say it, some of us enjoy talking about it. It does not feel like a risk to you. If I'm meeting somebody for the first time and I'm telling you all of my business, it is not me being vulnerable if I enjoy talking about it and it doesn't feel risky to me. For you, what is vulnerable are the things that feel like, oof, this is risky. But a lot of us are performing vulnerability because it looks like I'm taking risk, and I'm not. I enjoy talking about the divorce. But if for you, you're like, oof, this is really hard, but I'm going to go for it. That's vulnerability for you. I want to give you some examples if you don't believe me, especially for women. The fear of looking weak, the fear of looking wrong, the fear of looking weird, and I'm going to pause here, the fear of looking wonderful. For some of us, especially in female-dominated spaces, it feels risky to shine in front of our friends. It feels risky to say, I got the job, I retired, we got married, we got the house, because I don't want you to think that I think I'm better than you. I don't want you to see me as a target. That might be vulnerable for you. I encourage you to think about the things that feel very risky for you socially. I want you to consider the audience, the person you're talking to, because vulnerability is relative. The reason I'm spending so much time here is because for some of us, we'd experience more satisfaction in our friendships if we allowed ourselves to be vulnerable. But the things we're vulnerable about are different here. I'll give you one example. I had a friend recently, and I love her, but she is very vocal in her opinions about things she doesn't like. And she has told me about people's homes that she didn't like, and like the way they had it designed, I just With her specifically, felt very vulnerable to invite her into my home. Because it's very personal. I've got 2 kids. I don't know if you heard me earlier, okay? It's a very lived-in home. But it feels very vulnerable to have her over my house because of who she is, not because I'm embarrassed of my home, but because of the audience. It doesn't feel safe to be vulnerable here because you always have something to say about people's car and their house and the way they dress. Some of us might be making it hard for our friends to be vulnerable with us, but that's a whole other presentation. Let's stay focused. So with that being said, we're looking at 3 ways to deepen friendships that we have so we can have more quality relationships and live longer and be happier. So let's take a 60-second breakout with a partner. What is one tangible thing you can do, even if it's small, to create more depth in your friendships this week? I'll give us 60 seconds.
Promise me you'll catch me when I'm weightless. Hold me close before the crazy come. Until you're done with running, I'll be patient. 'Cause I know you'll be there. And I never had a plan for this. Everything is what it is. You never hold me back in anything. You didn't even have to try. I made up my mind, and I know you'll be there. With just one touch, you take me there. Without your love, we go nowhere. With just one touch, you're always there to remind me. You take me there. When waters rough, you will still be there. Your love, you're always there on my side. We go nowhere. With just one touch, with just one touch. When the tide's all out and you're neglected, it's okay if your river's running dry. Flips 180 when you least expect it. So just don't you cry. And I never had a plan for this. Everything is what it is. You never hold me back in anything. You didn't
All right. I'm so curious about the particular things that we came up with for this mini breakout here. Do we have 2 or 3 people who can share with us a tactical thing you've identified that you can do to create a little more depth in your platonic relationships this week? What did we come up with? Yes. 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 I love it. So she said she's a texter, but she's going to actually pick up the phone. I love it. Having that conversation in real time, you can hear my voice, you can hear my tone, you can hear my laugh, right? Love it. Great. Thank you so much. All right, can we hear 1 or 2 more? Yes, ma'am.
I am just the opposite. I'm actually a terrible texter, and so I think I need to make a commitment to actually respond to a text.
Let your friends know that you're alive. Yes. That's a great start. Okay, good. I also pick up themes. I think it's interesting that a lot of the things we're going to so far have to do with like our mode of communication as maybe something that impedes our closeness. That's interesting. Okay, can we get 1 more? Yes, we'll get 2 more here and then in the back. Yes, she said sent out handwritten letters of like, I appreciate you or thank you, 100%. Because we can already imagine being the recipient of something like that, right? That certainly leaves an emotional impression. You thought of me, you went through the effort, you're saying these words of affirmation. Yes, right? And there was one more, I'd love to hear it.
So one thing that I learned from a prior session is that the most valuable commodity is time. So spending time with a friend.
Thank you. So simple, but we keep pushing it off. You know, there's research from the American Time Use Survey, and their objective is to do exactly what the title implies, to gauge how are Americans spending their time. They found that in 2013, so this is before the pandemic, they found that in 2013 we were spending an average of 6 hours a week with our friends. We now spend 2 hours a week with our friends. And where did the time go? In alone time. That chart is skyrocketed. I don't have to go to the grocery store, I can DoorDash. I don't have to go to the movies, I can Amazon Prime. I don't have to go to the library, I can Kindle. I don't have to go work out, I can YouTube workout videos. I wonder at what cost do these modern conveniences come? So one thing I often suggest is to simply start by socializing your interests. What are the things that you're doing alone? What could you do to socialize it? But if by 1 degree, having a friend come over while you make dinner, not the friend who judges your house. She's not getting the... Don't invite her, okay? Can you go and read your book at the park? That's still socializing it. You're around other people. I can't tell you how many times I've been carrying a book and people, oh, what are you reading? It's a great conversation. But don't do it on the airplane because then you're like locked in with people and you're just like, can I just read my book, you know? Okay, so what are the things, I really challenge you after this to spend some time thinking if somebody were following you around and doing a little pie chart of how you spend your time, really, how much of it is alone? You could start by simply trying to find ways to socialize it by 1 degree. That's all I'm saying. And we'll end here. We said we're going to talk about how to make friends. You know how to do that. You're a champion. We talked about how to deepen friendships. We know what we're doing this week, and we just brainstormed several examples. And then finally, how do we build resilience? Because it's one thing to make friends, but if I'm turned off every time you do something I don't like and pull away, that's a problem. And how do we make friends specifically and build resilient friendships with other women? The reason this is relevant is because the research finds that 70% of a woman's social network is other women. And there are certain girl codes and things we say and things we know not to do and things anybody feel that way? Sometimes it feels like a landmine. You're like, oh, I feel like we were fine, but I feel like she's being cold. What's going on, okay? That's the only time I feel for men. I'm like, I get what you're saying. It can be kind of touchy, right? So I wrote a book that's coming out on May 7th. It's called Fighting for Our Friendships. And in that book, I share a framework. It's called the 3 Affinities of Female Friendship. In my 6 years of studying what the research has to say about women's cooperation, communication, and conflict, I have found personally that it comes down to the same 3 things. A lack of symmetry, a lack of support, a lack of secrecy. This is according to the research. This is not Danielle's opinion of what I thought would be fun alliteration. We'll start with symmetry. For women's friendships specifically, we like feeling like we're the same. You get me? I am you. Oh my gosh, she sees me, she gets it. There tends to be less leniency for being different. And I hesitate in saying that because I'm not saying women want clones, but I am saying you'd be hard pressed to find, I'll say this is anecdotal, okay? My husband can go and play basketball with a guy and learn some crazy things about this man's activity, personal behaviors, whatever, and still go grab a beer. You'd be hard pressed to find a bunch of women who are okay with discovering certain issues of morality or whatever it is and still be like, let's get coffee. Symmetry is very important to us according to the research. This can include reciprocity. That's probably the number 1 question I get. She doesn't reciprocate is the number 1 issue I get. Egalitarianism, which means we value feelings of sameness in terms of equality. We're on the same level, okay? Men's friendships can often withstand a little roasting each other, trying to like kind of do a hierarchy, kind of competing. Oh, you ran 3 miles, I ran 7 miles, and not a threat to their friendship. But we kind of know that if you're sharing with a group of friends, like, yeah, I ran 3 miles, and one of the ladies says, I ran 7 miles. We're all like, don't do it, no. and feelings of sameness. So these are the things that bring us together and the things that tear us apart. If you feel like there's lots of symmetry in whatever areas you've determined are important to you to be similar, then we're close. And sometimes when those things start to change over the life cycle, she's adopting new worldviews that's hard for me to identify with, or she's saying and doing these things, or she's criticizing me, which goes to the egalitarianism, because if I'm criticizing you, I'm implying that my choices are superior. These things make me feel, disconnected, right? The next is support. The research finds that the number one thing women look for in their same-sex friendships is emotional support. Meaning if you don't do anything else, I kind of expect you to have my back. That includes giving emotional help and showing acts of solidarity. If a woman shows you support early on in a friendship, you find yourself looking at her like, yes, okay. And when we're friends for a long time and we feel like she didn't have our back for something, we start to take pause. And finally, secrecy. This doesn't just refer to literal secrets, but the feelings that come with that, like being in a vault together, of trust, of exclusivity, you see me, I see you. Women's friendships are more dyadic than men's, meaning one-to-one. And you're taught from when you're little, well, who's your bestie? Is that your best friend? Is that your best friend? Okay, we tend to be dyadic, men tend to congregate in groups. But because of that, that accounts for why our friendships tend to have more platonic intimacy. But feeling like it's just me and you, feeling like I can self-disclose with you. I share, you share, I share. It helps us get close. That's how we establish and negotiate trust. And finally, trust. Those things are a part of the secrecy vault. These are the three things that bring us together. And if you're trying to put your finger on why there are tensions in a current friendship, I encourage you to reflect and think, oh, it's because of that. My hope is being able to identify it, offer some direction on how to begin to repair it. Because now I know what's going on. I know what we need to do here to recalibrate. Sometimes we can recalibrate. Sometimes we can't. But hopefully this gives us some language to better understand, I see what the matter is. As the life cycle moves on, as we move throughout the life cycle, we've got to build this skill. It's a skill of creating friendships, deepening them, and keeping them resilient and strong. I want to open up the floor here with the last, 10 minutes that we have or so to hear any questions that might have emerged from maybe breakouts that we did with a partner or some things that I shared here this afternoon. What questions do we have about friendship with regard to creating them, and keeping them strong? Yes.
Thank you. So you talked about kind of the phases of friendship, sort of the highs and the lows based on age. I guess in your work, have you noticed any big differences in what you hear from clients or folks that you work with based on age and sort of what their experiences are with friendships based on that when you see sort of the dichotomy there?
Not so much at this point of the life cycle, these are the issues and I see the same issues, maybe the details are different, but the number one things are just how to make friends, and typically that comes with some kind of qualifier. So as a divorcee, as an empty nester, as a military spouse who moves a lot, right? So I hear that those details are different. I often hear about, I don't know how to have this hard conversation with my friend. That doesn't go away, it's evergreen. And finally, complaints about lack of reciprocity. So I've seen the same complaints, but I see the details change throughout the life cycle. It's a great question. Thank you. Any other room? Yes.
When I was in high school, thank you so much. When I was in high school, I was bullied by girls. And so it was not an easy thing for me as an adult woman to be vulnerable, to trust, to open up. But yet I work with women and I encourage them to do that. I have been practicing that, and I feel like I'm getting better, if you will. But my question is, what would you say to someone who wanted to let go of friends? I had, she has passed away a couple years ago. My bestie, super extrovert, like the butterfly of the town. I'm an introvert, and so I always knew that she was doing something and somewhere, so I always had somewhere to be. But she often talked about weeding her girl garden. She had so many friends, and so many of us thought that we were her bestie. And so she did have a lot of besties, but there were often times where she would move away from a friend and feel fine about it. Sometimes pretty snarky about it, but sometimes pretty fine about it. But she would call it weeding her girl garden. What do you say about letting go of some relationships and how you would gauge that? Like, when is it okay to really work on it, and when is it like, I think this is over?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate her metaphor about the garden. I like that, like weeding out the garden, love
Yeah.
it. And research does show that we replace about half of our friends every 7 years. To some degree, there's a natural pruning that we can expect to happen as we move along. I mean, it's a romantic notion, the idea of keeping everybody that you meet along the way, but we know practically that's really hard to do. And when, again, some of these differences emerge or we feel an imbalance, it drains on us. And we can keep going back to quality relationships. If one was quality at one point and no longer is, at what point do we say, oh, I have to let this go because it's messing up the quality of my life to be engaged in this relationship? So if you're trying to figure out, like, do I keep it? Do I work on it? A couple of things that I can offer to guide you. I always say I don't like giving advice, but I'll give you some insights to inform the decisions you make. A couple things to ask yourself. One is how you feel before and after being with her. If you are depleted after leaving, I think that's a big one. Do you like who you are when you're with her? So if it's like constant gossiping and now I leave feeling a little guilty, I feel like I was complicit, or when I'm with her, I'm doing or saying more of what I would normally do. Do I like who I am when I'm with you? One is, does it feel like an obligation? Because for a lot of us, because women value, loyalty, being a good friend, are you staying with her because you've stayed with her? So, well, we've been friends 20 years, so, okay. I'm not saying to do that in a heartless way, and I'm not saying that's going to be very difficult. But I'm also saying if you're staying with someone because of history, so I ought to stay, I think that's something to look at too. So I think there are a couple different things we can use to evaluate if I think it's worth sticking this out. But if any conflicts you have had, you've articulated them and nothing's gotten better, and this person's shown an inability or unwillingness to try to kind of work on it, I think sometimes the writing's on the wall. But yes, it's very difficult. I mean, because when you're letting somebody go, you're not just letting go of the bad, you are choosing to let go of the good stuff that comes with it. It's very painful. And the last thing I'll say is, the reason why it's painful is the research finds that men tend to integrate their friends into their lives to the degree of a cousin, women to the degree of a sibling. You are deeply in my life. So when it's time to go, it's very disruptive. Okay, so it's very painful, but yes, it's something that we can't anticipate to happen throughout the life cycle.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I just, she was talking about her friend, talking about the sister's garden, and I'm in the process of growing a business, and the name of the business is Our Garden, and it's a space created for women to connect with their inner wisdom. So I thought that it was just, for me to say it, it was something for me to share. So if anybody, again, I'm in the process of growing that, and it's a place to just bring women together, connect with their inner wisdom while we grow together. So if anybody's interested, just, I'm Veronica, and just reach out.
Thank you for the plug, Veronica. Yes. If you're actively looking, there's a source, a super connector for us right there. Awesome. Thank you. All right, what others do we have? I think we have about 7 more minutes. Yes, ma'am. So funny is I've been doing this for 6 years, but that feels vulnerable for me. Whenever people are like, so talk to us about you, I'm like, no. Don't get distracted. So I'll say this. You can't do this work without having it impact your personal life. And I think the number one thing this has helped me with studying this is it has made me very brave. It has made me very brave. And that's for multiple things. To say what I need, whereas before maybe I don't want to ruffle feathers. I feel brave. To let go of people, but I don't want to hurt their feelings. I feel brave. To pursue the women I feel really curious about. I feel very brave. And I think it's because I know what the research says around all these things, vulnerability, fear of rejection, all these things make me feel very brave. And I thank God that it is showing real fruit, bearing real fruit in my friendships. But I'm also learning that it constantly requires work. I don't think anybody arrives and they're like, I've got it figured out. It requires work. And so I am blessed to have a good group of girlfriends. I turned 37 this summer. And I will say this because somebody was talking to me before this. I won't shout her out. But a woman was talking to me kind of as I was coming through today. And she was talking about, wanting to find her close girls. But is it too late? I know a lot of us might feel that way. And I can't stress enough that the moment you decide it's probably too late for you is when you've set that trajectory for yourself. It is never too late to be connected with a woman who just becomes your ride or die. So that's something I'm learning. I know it to be true. I don't know if those are the specific life details you're asking, but that's my general response. That's my general response to my friendship. And I thank God that I feel equipped to have now know how to have healthier friendships. Yes, and then yes.
Hi, thank you. I loved your talk. You mentioned creating friendship is a skill. I love that. And I have two daughters, 22 and 24, and often we talk about finding friends. They both are now out of college, and in this day and age, it's harder for younger people to meet other young people. My question is if you have resources on skill building. I know as adults we can get coaches and that sort of thing, but with young adults, they don't have the budget or the connections necessarily to find skill building coaching.
Yeah, that's good. I'm not surprised to hear that because mid-20s is about the age where women start coming to me. I think it might be because the research says that our social networks grow and grow exponentially until about the age of 26, at which they begin to decline. So can we still find friends? Yes, but that rate speeds up of losing friends. I know it's hard, especially in this time, especially with Gen Z, so difficult when you have peers who maybe don't value spending time and having full conversations. I get it. One resource is, this group is more comfortable leveraging technology to help them. And so, I was the spokesperson for Bumble for a little while, their Bumble for Friends app, and young girls are meeting new girls all the time on that app. I've heard the success stories. So I don't know if they're open to using technology, especially if their jobs maybe don't allow them to find people or if the budget's tight. And then also, I know this sounds kind of like, loosey-goosey or fluffy, but to really be brave, because I know at that age you want to be accepted and you don't want people to think you're being cringe if you lean into to say, hey, would you want to get coffee, or would you want to come over, or would you want to come with me to this class I was going to anyway? Do you want to come? Like being bold, because I think other people would be relieved that they went first. And so I think there's totally hope for them, but I would encourage them to leverage technology to be connected with people in their area who share the same similarities, life goals, and interests. So that could be a good starting point. But I know it's tricky. Yes?
So I have a lot of friends that are generationally different from where I am, younger friends and much older friends. So it's funny because I under feelings of sameness, like there are definitely seasons of why I'm friends with people that are older or younger than me. Does the research support, or, from what I've read is that all the generations need each other to not feel isolated, which is that loneliness factor, and how we flourish. Do you have any research about female friends? And I almost cringe to think, I'm almost thinking it's more like a mentor-protege or mentor-mentee type of relationship instead of just a strict friendship. Have you researched generational friends?
In the friendships where one person's older, what makes it feel like it's a mentorish type relationship? Is it just the age thing, or is it the role that person's playing? Like I'm playing the advisor, or playing the role of coach. Was it that?
Yeah, it's more of that.
Okay. So we're getting a question here about intergenerational friendships, with which the research does support as a great thing for both parties. People say that it gives them perspective, that it gives them optimism, all these things, right? Keeps them feeling young. So I highly encourage you to keep your mind open to intergenerational friendships. I will say this, if you're like, but sometimes I don't know if it totally feels like we have sameness, I don't know. I'll say this, that we do have intersectional identities. You have a bunch of different things that make you you. And so I think it's great to have communities for those different identities. So age might be one thing, because we're going through some of the same life cycle things, But then one can be your interests, or one could be you guys are both creative. So she's much younger, but man, you get this energy from her when you guys are talking about creative stuff, and your other friends can't give you that. So one tangible exercise I like to give, if you're like, I'm trying to find more connection, but I don't know where to start, is think about the statement, I am blank. And complete that maybe 4 or 5 times with various aspects of your identity. So for me, it would be, I am black, I am a woman, I am a mother, I am a creative. What are those things? Am I in communities for each one of those things? So I can find some support, affirmation, understanding. So I'd argue that it's great to keep those intergenerational friendships. I'd be curious about any power dynamics that come in. If you find yourself, oh, I keep getting in the habit of coaching her through or mentoring, I think at one point it can be helpful. But if you find that we're kind of defaulting to, you come to me and I'm your guide, and I don't enjoy that, I want more of a peer-to-peer relationship, then you could figure out, I mean, really the word would be boundaries around that. If you're like, oh, I don't want to play that role every time we get together, then you can maybe say like, you know what, let me take off the mentor role for a second. Can we just go, it can be playful, but I'm also letting you know, I don't really want to do this all the time. And a person might be willing to adapt if they had that data. So I wonder if that could be helpful to give you more satisfaction in those intergenerational friendships. Okay, yes. I know we have a couple, yes.
Hi. Do you find that when you were a teacher, the young people that you dealt with and now your clients, that the maturity levels as they relate to friendships and the fear of rejection are similar?
I think maturity levels for sure, and impulse control for sure, yeah. But I think the things we are tender about, I think are kind of the same. So of course with older clients, I hear more of like, you know what, I'm okay with it, like easier to accept certain transitions, or I'm hurt by it, but you know, I accept it. And teenagers not being able to get past it, or really ruminating on something to the point where it becomes detrimental and is contributing to anxiety and depression. You know, so I think we're tender about the same issues, but I have seen in terms of resilience, that to be a little bit different, and internalizing it, I've seen that to be different. So for example, when people say like, I don't know if she's gonna reject me, I don't know, I always say like, that comes with the territory. Putting yourself out there, it's inevitable, but I see people become immobilized by the possibility of rejection. I mean, I'd like to think I'm a relatively charismatic, wonderful conversationalist who's interesting with a lot to offer. And there are still women who are like, not feeling her. And it's like, it stings a little bit, but I'm more curious about what happens next. Because some of us are so fragile, we're done after that. I'm not doing that anymore. Oh my gosh, I guess I'm not as lovable, interesting, funny as I thought. I think I'm curious about how you cope, how quickly you bounce back, and how much you're internalizing that, I guess that's who I am, I guess I'm not. And so I've worked on that, and I feel like I can say, well, that stings, all right, okay, and move on, as opposed to, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore, not putting myself out there, what was I thinking? You know, so I see more of that with young people, internalizing that rejection, and I see those with more years being a little bit able to cope. But if you're asking about maturity in terms of like pettiness or a little drum, like, yes, that's on all sides, right? Yeah. All right, any others? I think we have time for a few more before we call it a day. Let's say 2 or 3 more. I think we've got runners with the mic. Yes.
So my question is, what thoughts do you have on cultivating friendships in the workplace? Do you think that business and personal should be separate? Do you think it's appropriate to seek friendships within the workplace? What's your opinion on that?
So I'll tell you, a lot of my opinions have changed since doing this work. I was raised by a mom who's like, you don't make friends at work. Like, you need to be professional. Professional implying I do not have friends at work. I've changed from that after looking at the research. So they find that we spend about 90,000 hours of our lifetime at work. You're spending a lot of time at work. And I personally now believe that when you pair that with a loneliness epidemic, but most of my time's at work, I now am open to making friends at work. I think there's a certain art to it now because this is my livelihood and I have to be careful. The stakes feel really high. But as far as me noticing women who I work with and, okay, we have a little rapport. Okay, she's cool. She's demonstrated she's trustworthy. She's a good worker. She has high integrity. I am open to now being like, okay, she seems cool. Maybe we could have something beyond coworkers. And I believe in pursuing that and not saying, actually, no, I'm being professional and missing out on opportunities. I wrote a piece for Harvard Business Review on this very subject. So if you want to look at my name, Google it with, Harvard Business Review. There are 5 tips, and I walked you through ways to kind of take it from we're just coworkers to like, okay, maybe we're friends. So I think there needs to be some kind of discernment and wisdom, but I think it's actually very practical to see that as a space of opportunity to make genuine girlfriends. That's just me. That's a great question, especially these days. I think we'd take 2 more. Okay, I see one here. And is there one last one we can wrap with after this one? Okay, great, and in the back, perfect. All right.
All right. I have one question. So just like when you become a mom, like your friendship circle kind of changes. And I became a mom really early. And so then I feel like the circle of friends I'm with were kind of not by choice, I would say, but more out of like convenience. But it kind of made me feel like I started to age myself. And so just like, I don't know, how do you develop like different friendships outside of your identity as a mom and just like around other people that are my age? That's something I kind of struggle with.
Yeah, I hear you, and thank you for sharing that, because I'm sure there are some of us who feel the same way, but you gave voice to it. So I would refer us back to the exercise before. So one of your identities, your I am statements would be, I am a mother. Can you tell me 3 others that will go into that statement? I am, who else are you?
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Black woman.
Yeah, and what's another way you'd complete that?
And another one is I'm a woman of faith,
Okay, and give me one more.
and I'm someone who loves community building.
Okay. So my next challenge to you would be, where am I in spaces with women who understand the experience of navigating this world as a Black woman? So I don't have to over-explain, justify, deal with microaggressions. Where am I in communities with people who share my worldview, my faith, so it almost feels like we're speaking shorthand, and they get it? And where am I in spaces that proclaim we champion community here? So maybe the central thing that glues you is not the mom thing, but how am I positioning myself in communities that reflect back to me these aspects of my identity? I think that could be a good starting point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, one more. Ready? Last one.
So I'm a mom, I'm a pain in the ass, and I'm an artist. Yay! So
Look at this.
I have also found myself without enough friends in life, and have joined a group called Annapolis BFFs, if anybody's interested, and have actually had an opportunity to make some real friends. And that's why I'm having a paint night on Saturday. So legitimately, if nobody here wants to come, that's cool, but if anybody wants to make a connection, I'm open.
Okay, that's awesome. That's amazing. I want to kind of end it with this. Two final things as we close. I don't know where the woman with the sign is, who's like, 2 minutes. Give it to me, 2 minutes. All right. One of these 2 things. The first is, I know we're saying so many things about friendship right now, and I'm saying, data says this, like 50 million times, I know. But I also want to take the pressure off a little bit, because I know we're talking about it, we're chewing on it, which is great. But let's take the pressure off. If you are walking around meeting new people with the grand goal of becoming besties, that's going to be a lot. I just suggest you just need one, and this is for your social health. The research says for good social health, one meaningful social interaction a day. So I always say prioritize connection before friendship. Friendship will follow. So if I'm just active about like, you know what, how can I strike up a conversation with the guy checking out my stuff at Target? Or how can I just talk to the woman who's my neighbor for like 2 minutes? I mean, that's connection with another human being, a natural byproduct. I'm sorry? Works every time. Oh my gosh. We're easy, that's so easy. There you go, okay? So just connection, that breeds friendship. So don't leave feeling pressured to do all the things, and don't miss out on good friendships because you're secretly auditioning for a bestie in everybody you meet. Come on now. So can I just be relaxed with like, oh, you know what, this was a great conversation on a Friday night, or this was a great paint night, okay? For the connection, I need social connection for my social health, right? And then the last thing I'll say is I hope everyone is leaving feeling encouraged. I know we're at a time where you are on social media and people are saying stuff about people these days don't know how to be friends, and you can't trust people, and people don't even value. There's a lot of that chatter. I see it all the time. I hope that looking around this room with women who are raising their hands, asking questions, taking notes, this is your evidence. This is your evidence that there are people who are like, okay, how can I work on this? How can I find my people? So I hope this keeps us encouraged, and I hope it keeps us optimistic. Okay? Thank you so much for your time.